Parakaigui, Paragapa, Parakaigui, Paragapa, Lina, la ibaila ni lina, la izumami, baila ni lina, la ginin hantu ginin hami, baila ni lina, la Hatsa, Hugwa, Tulu, Fafa, Makpo. Hadzi hami, itau tau tanu. Hadzi ham, uri tau. Hadzi hami,
Itau tau tanu, itau tau tanu. Hadzi ham, uri tau, uri tau.
Ginen manu,
Itau tau tanu.
Ginen itanu, Zani tosi.
Dani tossi, galidi, 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 galidi. Tunus motna, gihilo tossi, galidi, 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 galidi. Fanui hami, ginahan tossi,
Hadzi tom tom,
gihilo tossi. Adzui, chamori, galidi, 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 galidi. Tunus motna, gihilo tossi, galidi, 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 galidi. Fanui hami, ginahan tossi.
Parakaigui, Paragapa, Parakaigui, Paragapa,
Lina, la, ibaila ni lina, la, itun mami. Baila ni lina, la, ginin hami. Baila ni lina, la, hatsa, hugwa, tulu, fafa, makpo.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmony of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as a listening sky. Let us march on till victory is won.
Hafid everyone. What we did earlier was a Chamorro chant called Galidi. The chant it's about navigation on the canoe, which is Galidi, coming all as one for you, for me, and from our past and for our future. This chant is significant for all first-generation students and students of color who've had to navigate the rough seas of institutional racism, and all of us had a different journey to be to where we are today. Many of us have had to deal with teachers and institutions that tried to devalue our cultures and parts of who we are. But just like this chant, and just like the students today, we are survived and we're overcoming the institutions that's trying to sink us.
I sang the Black National Anthem. It was originally written as a poem and then sung for President Lincoln on his birthday, and then it became the Black National Anthem. So, and that song is powerful. So. All right. We would like for you to put your hands together for the Felix Bradford, the Director of TRiO Service Student Success. Woo!
Thank you, Shamarika. Thank you, Martina, for introducing me. I feel kind of funny standing behind this podium, so I'm going to stand in front of the podium to welcome you to the Evergreen State College, to reflect on the 40 years of TRiO at this institution, to recognize the land that we sit on, and honor the indigenous people that came before us, whether it was the Squaxin, whether it was the Nisqually, or whether it was the Cowlitz. Before we begin anything, we must first recognize the folks that were here before us in order for us to have a place here today. Hopefully this clicker works. I would like for folks to take some time to look at this image. The title of this workshop presentation is Writing History Now, and has a double meaning. Writing, such as the physical act of writing, and writing, the conceptual act of righting wrongs. And if we're going to frame TRiO, and if we're going to frame Upward Bound, we must look at the historical context in which it was birthed. And we're not going to go all the way back to the beginnings. We're going to look and start at modern day. The integration of Little Rock in Arkansas and the Little Rock Nine. And if you can just take a moment to look at this image and look at the two different realities that these students face at the same place, should put into perspective the direction that we're going to go this afternoon. Please take another moment to look at this image. Oops. There's similar sentiments in 2013 in some areas of our country, in some communities of our country. Some people may say that this is in the 60s and that's down south or back east, and that we're immune to this type of mindset and rhetoric in the Pacific Northwest. And I would encourage you to ask yourself a very critical question: how true is that? And that the people, and particularly the image of this little girl, are people that are still alive today. So for folks that are younger, don't think this is some distant memory of far, far long ago, okay? And so the conditions of our society were to the point where people were literally getting snatched off the street by dogs because they're in a place where they shouldn't be, even if all they're trying to do is to go to the store for their mother. In 2017, certain populations and communities live in the same type of fear. Despite the strides that conversations like this produced. These are images that many of us have seen in the past of civil rights leaders, particularly civil rights leaders such as MLK. But what's missing from this picture, and I would be remiss to not mention it, are the women leaders behind the scenes, the women of color behind the scenes. Whether it was Ella Baker or Betty Shabazz, or the Latino brothers of Cesar Chavez, or the more militant and radical mindset of Malcolm X. Those perspectives were just as important in these conversations as the people that we believe made the biggest difference. So with the passage of the Civil Rights in '65, there was new legislation that came about in the war on poverty. And with the war on poverty, programs like Upward Bound emerged to help more students of color, to help more low-income white students get access to post-secondary education that were often sealed off from their entrance. In 1965, Upward Bound piloted 17 programs across the country, from some of the most prestigious Ivy League schools to historically black colleges, to even right here in the great Pacific Northwest of Western Washington University. And during a time in our country where we're at a watershed time where things had to change, and innovative and dynamic programming and frameworks had to be instilled, the outcomes that these 17 programs produced outpace many colleges and universities' outcomes when taking into consideration all populations. Evergreen received Upward Bound in '77. TRiO is Upward Bound. Upward Bound is TRiO. Upward Bound came first, not just nationally, but here at Evergreen. And just like nationally, it was more than just about getting students into those pristine classrooms and halls of academia. It then became the issue of how do we ensure that those students that are here are actually going to be successful at the institutions that just accepted them. And they created student support services. And the actual name from over 50 years ago was Special Programs for Disadvantaged Students. That's a great title, okay? That's a great name. You think, I'm saying it cynically, right? At Evergreen, it was called KEY, Keep Enhancing Yourself, something we changed fairly recently so that we can actually brand TRiO and give honor to the history and legacy that it has in connections with the civil rights movement and the fight for fairness and equality regardless of who you are. In 2004, we had an at-risk program that only served students at a 2.0 or below at one of the most neediest high schools in Pierce County. In 2012, nearly 35 years after the original Upward Bound, Clover Park High School was added to the TRiO family at the Evergreen State College. And now in 2016 and 17, the institution has put forth resources and time from various folks, thank you, Stacia, to expand the program, to double its size in Tacoma, to emphasize math and science, and to reach back into our own backyard and build partnerships and connections with the Shelton School District and Shelton High School. This is retrieved from Evergreen's archives. And this very proud man standing up on the screen with his wonderful outfit, right? This was Evergreen's official uniform to come to work in 1987. It's Stone Thomas. And Stone Thomas is somebody who has great historical legacy here at the Evergreen State College, from being the first director of the Third World Coalition, which is now Evergreen's Diversity and Multicultural Office, which is First Peoples, to working hard to see Upward Bound get to the Evergreen State College, and also bringing TRiO here years later. And in this clip from 1984, there's a quote from a former Upward Bound director, Tomas Yabata, who is now the vice president of Yakima Valley Community College, approximately for like the last 10 years. And if I could squeeze down and read this, and what Tomas says is the growth of our participants cannot be reduced to statistics, he says. The fact that kids are stimulated, inspired to push themselves way beyond what is thought could be done, for me, is the proof of our success. So with that said, that y'all's stories are beyond the data, beyond numbers, quantitative data, and beyond numbers that you can count, but you represent stories and experiences and legacies that can contribute more good to this institution than numbers alone. Please take a moment to look at these two boxes, practice your quantitative reasoning skills, and see how we compare to the programs of 65 from those institutions that I mentioned earlier. And there will be a quiz at the end of this, so please take careful notes. Some people take mental notes, some people take physical notes. We're all different styles of learners, so make sure. Thank you. Take pictures. Yes, thank you. Take pictures. The PowerPoint will be sent out if you like it, like me too. But again, it's more about the folks and not about the numbers. Thank you, ma'am. Let's wait. Everybody else, you want that? Okay, now. I'll send it out to you if y'all really like it. We'll post it to the Facebook, the Instagram, Snapchat, and the Twitter feed for the world to see. I'll get it for you, Ashley. Upward Bound approaches building curriculum with students in a very similar way as the Evergreen State College. We believe in interdisciplinary studies where different contexts, subjects are integrated under the central theme of an issue that needs to be solved. And that's what Upward Bound does. We look at the material conditions of students' lives. We understand their past experiences. And we develop academic programs that build upon each other to produce students who will have the foundational skills in terms of identity development and confidence of who they are and where they come from. So when they go off to institutions, when they face challenges, academic challenges, social challenges, that they will always be able to look back at their ancestors, at their family, at their personal experiences, so that they know that they can persist, they know that they belong, and they know that people have fought and died for you to have a chance today to do something in your family that's never been done. Oh. There's another clip right here, and hopefully it's not blurry, but this was taken from the Evergreen catalog in 1982, and it was a summer bridge program, credit-bearing, developed and funded by the institution, specifically as a bridge program for Upward Bound students. And the learning objective, or how they were going to go about achieving success back then, they said, the course begins with a week of orientation activities. Upon completion of the course, students will have completed plan to enter post-secondary education. The course will provide a survey of liberal arts, skill assessment, individual skill building, all in lab settings. In 2012, many of these students that are sitting up here today participated in this summer bridge program titled Breathing Stories to Life, where 25 students that graduated from the Tacoma School District wrote their memoirs of what it was like to be a student going through the system K through 12 and most importantly, being a student of color, going through a system that was not necessarily supportive or open to their contributions. I won't even explain because it's too complicated. But essentially, we put students at the center, and this is for TRiO student success. We provide supports to them from financial literacy, from helping them find academic pathways, from helping them transition into the institution, by surrounding them with a peer support network that can do things that staff can't do. And we try to address all of the things that are on their mind that often impede their opportunities and chances of being successful in the classroom. Because if you're at an institution where your students are low income, students of color, or a part of any other communities that are underserved, what they're worried about is the finances, the careers, the support, the belonging. And unless those things are taken care of, whether they can synthesize the concepts in your academic programs, might be second, third, or fourth on their priority list. I'm not going to go too in depth, but over the last 5 years, TRiO here at Evergreen, particularly the undergraduate program, has increased our numbers to serving over 50% students of color, nearly doubling the numbers of students of color from 5 years before. Take a picture if you really want to analyze it. Cool. Another shift that we want to do to address the students who need the most support here at Evergreen, or just everywhere, are first-year students. And along with intentionally targeting some of the most underserved populations on our campus in terms of race, we also intentionally targeted some of the most underserved students on our campus, first-year students. And over the last 5 years, we have increased our number of first-year students by 10%, or nearly double. Okay, 10% overall growth, 16 to 26, but from 16% to 26% of overall. And that is, and in some folks' minds, that is dicey when it comes to first-year students, when you are held accountable to their success. The blue line represents the persistence or retention rates of TRiO students at the Evergreen State College. The orange line represents non-TRiO students at the Evergreen State College. And persistence means that they were here, you were here in the fall of one year, and you were back here the following fall. Okay? And what students don't know, particularly the first year, 45 credits earned is the tipping point that is almost the exact indicator of your likelihood to graduate from that institution. The first year is the hardest year to persist. And if you can make it past that first year, you're going to be successful the second year, the third year, and the fourth year. But what success looks like for all students is not created equal. And we will get into that when we share the voices of our students. So when I think back on our history, and I just think back on the images that I've shared with folks, it doesn't necessarily make me feel all good. Because there's no way that the sentiment that people felt 55 years ago, where they didn't even want somebody in the classroom sitting next to them, or they didn't want their son or daughter to be friends with somebody because they're either black or brown, like those sentiments have not gone away. And when I think of most of our faculty and administrators, not just here, right, but around the country, have been exposed to this type of mindset and thinking majority of their lives, unless they have intentionally challenged it and worked hard to continue to fight for what's right in terms of not treating people wrong because they're black. Okay, it's as simple as that. And so what I think about when I'm discouraged, I think about the stories that have been passed down to me, passed down to Felix Bratheth, fifth, the grandson of Anselmo Bratheth, the great-grandson of Ricardo Bratheth, the grandson of Esperanza Mamori. And my grandfather and my great-grandfather that I just mentioned are from St. Croix. And if you don't know where St. Croix is a part of the Caribbean. And it is actually a U.S. territory. But it was a Danish territory. But it was one of the major ports or spots when the slave trade happened that black folks were dropped off. And there's been many efforts throughout history across the world for revolts. But in 1848, on the island of St. Croix, through education, through organization, and tired of waiting for change to happen, they forcefully took the island back. And they were led by the queens of the island. Mary Thomas, Elizabeth Solomon, Matilda McBean, who did this, who led this, but who also spent decades incarcerated in Danish prisons for their contributions. And I tell this story because of first-generation students of color. We all share similar struggles where people before us have done things that will scare the living daylights out of us right now. And when we face challenges and we wonder if we're going to be successful, we all have people to turn to through history and through the present to make change.
My name is Michael Lim, and I'm the son and grandson of refugee parents and grandparents who escaped from the genocide in Cambodia. I would like to sit behind, this podium right here. Makes me feel less safe, but I'll try to get up. Even though you might see my shivers, I'll bear it all. So, here's a little story. So I remember back in 7th grade, middle school, Tacoma Public Schools, Giadrone Middle School, if anybody went there. Giadrone, Jadrone, some people call it different things. But it was in 7th grade. I was in, it was a Tuesday. I was in Ms. Pearson's leadership class. The teacher was teaching us how to tape posters properly. I don't know if you ever learned that, but I didn't know you had to tape. I just taped posters. But you would turn the poster around, and she would teach us how to tape it horizontally and all this kind of stuff. But so I was sitting by my friend Tien, and he just came here from Vietnam. And this is his first time in a classroom, and we're just talking about the differences, in the classrooms here and the classrooms over there. So as I'm learning how to tape, the door swings wide open, this classroom door, and out comes 2 cops, the principal, and the 2 cops look straight at me, Tien, and then 6 other Asian boys in the classroom. They pointed at us like 1, 2, 3, 4, get up. And we walked out in a line with 2 cops, 1 in front of us and 1 behind us of the line. And I remember, like, if you ever got, singled out for anything, is you get all the stares in the classroom and they look at you like, whoa, what did you do? What did you do? But I remember those stares of, the teacher staring at me with a blank face, and why is that even happening? And, I'm walking out, and right out the side of the classroom, the cops told us to put ourselves on the wall, hands face up, turn your back, and they patted us down. I didn't know what was happening. My friend was about to cry. When you're at that moment, where someone says you did something, but you have no idea you even did something. And shoot, it was a hard moment. We were patted down. And I kept yelling, what do we do? What do we do? And the police officer, you're a gang member. I'm not no gang member. But it happened to be that day. And at that moment, I kind of remembered a story that my grandfather told me just like a couple weeks ago, really. And like I said before when I introduced myself, I am the son and grandson of refugee survivors of the Khmer Rouge genocide. So what that was, this radical group in 1975 came to Cambodia and took over the government, and basically they wanted to change everything. They wanted to erase the previous history of that country. So what they did was they burned on the libraries, they killed a lot of people who were cultural centers, people who wore glasses, people who were educators, because they wanted to get rid. 10 million people later, dead. So, and that story was, my grandfather told me, was that night, the soldier busted through his house and basically said, you gotta leave, we're gonna burn down your house right now. And he took, what little belongings he had. The soldier gave him about 2 minutes. He was already trying to light up the house. And my grandfather, grabbed my mother, went out to the house and stood on the street. And then the soldiers lined them up. And basically, they started asking questions. Who did what? Who did what? And someone said, I'm a doctor. Boom, got shot. This person wore glasses. They just shot him right there. My mom wore glasses. My grandpa took her glasses and basically crunched them up and threw it behind her so they wouldn't see. And I kind of tell you this story because at that moment, when I was getting patted down and all my friends and I didn't know what we were doing, I kind of thought about that. Like, is that kind of what it feels like to be singled out, to be judged, to be labeled for something? And, yep. Thank you.
Inanuhusi Janina Mae de la Cruz Smith Prince. Inanan Biahu Siha y Barbara Maria Castro de la Cruz. Ginin Didigi Sanahanya Gohan. Dan Maria Tyron Magofnia Smith. Ginin Dedido Gohan. Itatan Biahu Siha Si Eddie Nerpio de la Cruz, Ginin Pangasinan, Philippines. Dan E. Henry Borja Smith, Ginin Island Siha Palau, Zan Saipan. Iasaguahu, I Maurice Prince, Zani Famago Onhem, I Analia, Jeremiah, Zan Isa Mayana, Sumasagadzu, Spanaway, Washington. And I'm an advisor here in the Upper Bound program. And I struggle to speak my own language in front of you, but I want to thank all of you for listening. What I basically said was I introduced myself, I introduced my people, my grandmothers, my grandfathers, my parents, my husband, and my children in a way to share a little bit more of who I am. And I'm speaking because I want to address Michael and his story. As you were sharing, it really, like, for me, my whole body is shaking right now because I can relate to a lot of what you say, and it brings fear into my heart for my own children. And I want to thank you for sharing your own story with all of us. The thing is, one wish that I have is that I wish that this country could have lived up to the sanctuary and the safety that your parents dreamed of for you to bring you here. And sadly, when I'm listening to that story, I see that racism, it repeats itself. You know, like it has this history to keep going and to keep living on. And that really saddens me. But what I admire about you is your bravery and your courage to be able to still stand up on that stage and to tell your truth and to speak your truth, because to be able to just stand up there and to share your experience in the color of your skin, it merely just puts a target on your back just to do that. So it's dangerous, and I hope that everybody understands that. To be able to stand up there and to share your raw, true feelings and your truth with the institution and the world is very dangerous. And so I really commend you for that, and I really want to thank you again for saying your piece. And despite everything, despite all of it, you're still here. Despite everything that we've been through, we're still here. I know that I wouldn't be who I am today without the stories that I was able to hear from my grandparents and my grandmother. In 1941, our island was bombed. Our island was abandoned by the United States. While my grandmother was only 7 years old, she walked along the way trying to go to her uncle's house. When she heard sirens, and she heard explosions, and she heard bombs, and she ran for her life. It makes me think of what our grandparents went through, what they endured and what they witnessed. Enslavement, torture, rapes, beheadings. They didn't ask for any of it. They didn't ask for the wars. This wasn't their war, right? But they fought, they survived, they tricked, they resisted, and they protected each other. And that makes me stand in amazement of you, because this must be where your bravery comes from. And it shows me that history really does, in fact, repeat itself. Just as racism lives on, so too does your family history of survival and resilience. It continues. Their legacy lives on in you, so long as you continue to speak your truth. History can't hold you down when you use it to move you forward.
My name's Dominique Ellerson, and this is my story. I was born in Tacoma, Washington, to a white mother, Heather Marie Ellis, with a racist family, a black father who didn't know I was his yet, and named after a man whose blood doesn't run through my veins. Ellerson is my last name, named after Damian Antonio Ellerson, the only man I knew as a father up until the age 2, because that's when he left for the store and never came back. And no, he didn't leave me abandoned and fatherless. That was the night he got murdered in December '95. That would be the first Christmas I would spend with my biological father, Howard Shondell Mance. Shondell's the name he prefers. At this time, me and him weren't really close. We would only see each other Christmas, holidays, birthdays, other special occasions. It wasn't until around middle school when we grew closer. Throughout middle school, I lived in a predominantly white town named University Place, and after middle school, I moved back to Tacoma, the Hilltop to be more exact, which is like a hood in Tacoma. And you would think being both black and white, I could fit in anywhere. That definitely wasn't the case. My white family and friends always said I was too black or always acted ghetto. One of them even thought she was mixed because she was 1/16 black, but if you looked at her skin, you would only think she was white. My black family and friends always told me I act or talk white, whatever that means. It wasn't until I was a junior in high school when I found a group of friends that I actually fit in with. With this group of friends, I got in a lot of trouble and almost failed majority of my classes, which dropped my GPA significantly. When it came time to apply for college, I almost didn't get in because of that.
I'm just gonna be honest, I do not feel good, so if y'all hear me snorting, it's because I'm trying to get it right. I'm Shamirika. I'm the daughter of Holly Scott. I'm the granddaughter of Elaine Carter, and I'm the great-granddaughter of Epsy Worley. And I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is the Black Wall Street. And I come from a long line of strong black women that know how to fight, and we fight very well, and we win most of the time. And so here's my story. I'm the second child of 4 children. I have an older sister, 2 younger brothers. And the thing that makes me different from my brothers and sisters is, well, I'm the darkest one. I don't know, because I've been in Washington for a while, so I'm kind of light-skinned now. But I grew up being labeled because I was the darkest, and I was super hyper. I was always that cousin that everybody wanted to come over, but they didn't want you to stay the night because you would break something on an accident. That was me. And I came to Washington when I was in the 2nd grade, and I had no idea that this place even existed. I thought I was actually going to Washington, D.C., because it was the only Washington I ever heard about. And we got on a Greyhound bus, and we came up here, and I started school a couple weeks later. And I remember coming home and telling my mom, "There's no black people in my class." And she said to me, "Well, yeah, we're in Washington." Yeah, but you didn't tell me there was no black people, because when I went to school in Oklahoma, my school was full of black kids. We only had one family of white kids in my school. And so that was a difference for me. And people kept telling me how tall I was. And I didn't understand that, because everybody that I grew up with in Oklahoma was the same height as me. And then that's when I realized I had grew faster than everybody else in Washington, so I was pretty tall. And that's when I learned that I couldn't read or write, and I got these labels like being illiterate, and I didn't even know what that meant. And that was the first time anybody ever called me a lesbian. I didn't even know what that was. I just felt offended for some reason, because in my family I grew up being a tomboy, and that was just like normal. I could dress however I wanted, and I just swam like my cousins swam. They swam in boxer shorts, so did I. I didn't know that was a thing. And so that's when I had the labels of not being smart and not being intelligent. And I kind of had to work up until now to dismantle those.
My name is Isabel Escobar, and soy hija de Isidoro Escobar Alvarado de La Mojonera, Michoacán, and hija de Elizabeth Carreño Vargas de Cacahuamilpa, Guerrero. I don't mention my grandparents because I only met my grandpa on my mom's side and my grandma on my dad's side. My parents came to Tacoma when they were around the age of 18 and had me around the age of 25. My mom was 8.5 months pregnant when she got the chicken pox, and she didn't know English, so when they told her there was a possibility that if I got infected, I could die in the womb, she didn't know what was going on. Luckily that didn't happen, because I'm here today. And I was born on this day 23 years ago. And my dad to support his family, because he has 4 children, used to work from sunrise to sundown, so I wouldn't see him a lot. And I mean, there's so many stories I could tell you about that, but I'm a daddy's girl, so yeah, I didn't see him a lot. And then like on the weekends, he would make me sit down with him and he would make me learn Spanish. He would make me read and write and just have conversations with him in Spanish so I wouldn't lose that part of my roots. And I used to hate it. I used to hate sitting there and having to do that until I went to elementary school and I tested out of ESL in the 2nd grade. After that, they used to take me out and I would have to go be with this little girl who had mental retardation, and because she only spoke Spanish and nobody else in the school knew how to go about that, they had me go be with her for a couple of weeks or months, I'm not sure. And I would be with her and they didn't care about whether or not I was missing class myself. That's when I realized how important it was for me to know Spanish. And in middle school, McElvey Middle School, which does not exist anymore because they put First Creek there, I used to translate for the adults and I used to volunteer a lot because I had really supportive teachers, and that's when I really became more in tune with my Spanish. And yeah.
Hello? So my family, my grandmother is named Maria Gonzalez. She is from Nacorichico in Sonora, Mexico. And my grandfather's Rafael Villa Sr., and he is from Suaki. They're Yaquis who had to escape the genocide that occurred between like 1876 and 1911 in Sonora, Mexico. And in the Americas, they had a population of over 7 million when the foreign invaders arrived. And Mexico alone had a population of between 30 and 37.5 million people. By 1650, the native population in the Americas dwindled to only 3.5 million people. The point I'm trying to make is that you are a result of survivors. You would not be here if it weren't for so many people surviving genocide after genocide. You wouldn't have a language here today if you hadn't had people come through all this disease and all this genocide. They didn't let anything stand in their way so that you can be here today. And I've seen you on several occasions doing the exact same thing. And so I think that you should be very proud that you're living that legacy and that you're here today. So thank you for doing that for us and for our people.
My name is Mayra Cortez. I'm the daughter of Julia Santiago Marquez and César Cortés Díaz. Mis raíces mexicanas están firmemente plantadas en Zapopan, Jalisco. Mi padre y mi madre vivían directamente enfrente de cada uno durante todas sus vidas en México. Después de que mi madre y mi padre se casaron, mi padre convenció a mi madre de moverse a los Estados Unidos porque no consideraba las condiciones en México cómodas, suficiente o aceptable. Mis padres dijeron que querían lo mejor que les pudieran dar a sus hijos, y eso significaba que tenían que ir para el norte. Sin embargo, este deseo para sus hijos significó que encontraran décadas de sufrimiento. Mis hermanos y yo también sufrimos junto con ellos, pero yo siempre supe que era mucho más difícil para mis padres. Durante toda mi vida he visto a mis padres luchar. Debido a sus luchas, mis padres siempre nos decían la importancia de una educación. Siempre nos animaron a obtener una educación porque ellos creían que era una forma de lograr una vida mejor y para no sufrir como ellos. Mis padres vivieron sus sueños a través de mí. Después de que salí de la high school, I was the water after a drought that sparked hope within my family for a better harvest. Ser la primera en mi familia de graduarse no fue el único logro que querían mis padres y mucho menos el único logro que quería yo misma. Así que decidí continuar mis estudios en the Evergreen State College. They just have to turn it on.
Hello? Ah. She did something to my mic. So that was chapter 1. Chapter 2, middle school was so much fun. Oh my gosh. But I continued to have to be pulled out of class to do testing, and I always got special accommodations, like when I had to do the WASL. Do y'all still take the WASL? Okay. Yeah, they probably changed the name, but I had to do the WASL, so I would get to like chew gum, because I guess chewing gum does something to the brain and makes you remember stuff. So I used to get to pick whatever type of gum I got, and I got to chew all the gum I wanted and smack and everything else, because I was the only person in the room. And people would read, my my test to me, and which was a benefit for me, because now I'm realizing that they were telling me the answer. Because you know when it's the answer, they make their voice go up a little bit higher. B, I chose B. And so I had to do that in middle school. And that was when I really got into sports. And I played all the sports. I did track. I set a couple records. And I had no idea that I was good at sports. I just liked to do them because they were fun. And I was able to be aggressive and not get in trouble for it. Because anywhere else, it was like, you're black, you're aggressive. Here goes a referral. Go see the black principal. That's how it was at my school. And my principal the head principal was black, and the rest of them were white. And they did not like me. They could not stand me. They wanted to expel me from like the beginning of time, because I had the most referrals in my entire school, but none of them were violent. I just was a class clown, like to the maximum. And I would even make my teachers laugh, and they would write on my referral that I was very comical, but it was inappropriate. And so I always ended up in trouble in that way. And so my principal name was Miss Roberts, and she was like an elder black woman. She played no games. She was from Alabama, and she told me a couple times she would whip my ass, and I was like, what? Like, this is crazy. She had my mom's name on her desk, like big underneath the glass. You know how they got them tables, them desks, and she kept me in line in a way that was not appropriate, because she would threaten me, but it worked. It was something that it made sense to me. You gonna beat my ass? Okay, I'm gonna stay in class. I'm gonna do right? And when I got to high school and I was getting ready to graduate, because it was so hard for me to graduate, even though I was a good student, I wasn't smart, because I had all these labels on me as far as like not being dyslexic and not being able to read or write. Even though I read and write all the time, I still believed these people. And it was sports that kept me going. I was a Division I athlete from the time I was 15. I've played in all the tournaments and led my team to state and all these different fantastic woohoos. And I'm like, they don't even mean anything now. But when I was ready to graduate, my high school teacher, she made a couple phone calls and called my principal from when I was in middle school. And I got to talk to her on the phone. And that was a phone call I will never forget, because my teacher calls her on the phone and she asked her, do you know who Shamirka Scott is? And she goes, yeah, I would never forget that name. And then she was like, what does she do now? Because she just knew I was in some trouble. And then my teacher was like, oh, I'll let her get on the phone. And I get on the phone, and then I was like, well, I'm not calling because I'm in trouble. I'm calling to tell you that I'm graduating, and to hear her cry on the phone was just like, it was a good feeling, because I went through a lot to graduate, so.
Mic check. All right. Shamerika, that's one thing that I have admired about you from the day I first met you, was that you're strong enough to recognize the labels and the things that people put on you and not be affected by them, and to meditate on them and to deconstruct them and to know why that they're there and know that they are things that are external to you. And that makes you extremely powerful and a pleasure to be around. And one of the reasons that I'm up here on the student panel is because I graduated from Evergreen, Tacoma in 2015 at the age of 45, which made me what colleges and universities call a non-traditional student. I never liked the term non-traditional student. At first I didn't like it because it just seemed like it was like sugarcoating. It's like if you mean I'm old and I'm going back to school, then why don't you just say you're old and you're going back to school? I don't like to sugarcoat things. So that's why I didn't like it at first. But then the more I thought about it, as I progressed through the institution, the more I found the term demeaning. It's like, wait a minute, non-traditional student? So you mean you see me as a traditional non-student? You see me as traditionally uneducated? You saying I'm intellectually at a disadvantage? No, I can't let you put that on me. Not going for it. That's a trick. And history's full of tricks like that. And I know my history, and I know myself, so I can't go for that. So I got the feeling, though, that it was bigger than that even, which leads me to why I'm here. It's bigger than just me. This is bigger than me. Y'all know Big Sean? It's bigger than me. And and I said, wait a minute, I am non-traditional. I'm non-traditional in the sense that traditionally in this society, college undergraduates are young, affluent, white-collar, white people. And so I'm very non-traditional, and everybody sitting on this panel is non-traditional. And as a matter of fact, we're from communities that the Department of Education refers to as traditionally underrepresented communities. And we're here because we're tired of being traditionally underrepresented. We're tired of being traditionally overlooked and underserved by higher educations. We want our people to be welcome in here. We want our people to come to higher ed and to prosper and to flourish for generations to come.
So when it came time for me to apply for college, I applied to 3. I applied to Central Washington University, University of Washington Bothell campus, and the Evergreen State College. You guys remember how I said my GPA dropped and it was hard for me to get in college? Well, my first letter I got was from Central Washington, and they pretty much told me they didn't want me because of my grades. The second letter I got was from UW Bothell. They pretty much told me to see how my first semester went and then send them a new transcript and a new letter when it came time. Evergreen said the same thing. So I worked my hardest to get my grades up my senior year, and I sent my transcript in to UW Bothell, and they told me to try again after my freshman year of college. After writing my second personal statement for Evergreen, giving them new transcripts, and meeting with the admissions counselor, I finally got into a college. At first, I was iffy about coming to Evergreen because it definitely wasn't my top choice. But once I finally got on campus, I actually kind of enjoyed it. My first program I took was taught by Chico Urbison. And at this point, I didn't realize how important Chico would be throughout my college graduation or college career. The main program that stuck out to me the most throughout college would be Gateways for Incarcerated Youth. In this program, we would visit the Green Hill Academic School once a week. And this just isn't any ordinary school. It's a juvenile rehabilitation center, or in not so nice words, a juvenile detention center. It was a medium to maximum security prison for young men. And on the first day of walking through those doors, I didn't expect to see familiar faces and meet new ones so close to home. One of the faces I seen on the first day was this boy who went to high school with me. Me and him actually were really good friends, sat at the lunchroom table together, walked through the halls together, rode the bus before and after school together. Another boy went to Lincoln High School. Another one dated this girl who I actually went to high school with. He was from Seattle. I remember walking through there. It was so hard to spend those 2 hours a day with them, or to spend 2 hours once a week with them, to only be able to leave and then still have to stay there. It always had me thinking that, how did I do things that could have landed me in jail, but yet I made it here to college with a bachelor's degree, and they made it behind bars? That question still haunts me to this day.
Hi, my name is Yvonne. I am the daughter of Teresa León Dávila and José Antonio Madrigal. Yo crecí entre Jalisco, México y los Estados Unidos. Mis padres son inmigrantes a este país y recuerdo la primera vez que tuve que ir a la escuela al llegar aquí. Estaba en una escuela llena de estudiantes, personas que eran muy güeras, rubias, ojos de colores, y recuerdo que en mi clase de ESL solo había tres latinos. Mi hermana mayor, un chico que se llamaba Oscar, que estaba en el mismo salón que yo, y yo. Y recuerdo que durante ese primer año la maestra ni siquiera me miraba, no me dirigía la palabra, era como que si yo fuera un bicho. Y el chico Oscar fue el que me ayudó. Él me enseñó las matemáticas y el inglés y los nuevos juegos de la escuela y qué hacer, porque yo no sabía qué hacer. Y mi familia es de un pueblo pequeño que se llama Temajac de Brizuela, así es que mi abuela tiene 10 hijos. Como muchas familias mexicanas, tengo muchos tíos, muchos sobrinos y primos y todas esas cosas, pero mi abuela tuvo que trabajar muy duro para ayudar a su familia y le enseñó a mi mamá que la educación tiene poder. Así es que si tienes una educación, puedes hacer muchas cosas y puedes lograr ser algo grande. Y obviamente mi mamá no pudo hacer lo que ella quería porque no tenía la educación. Pero recuerdo llegar de la escuela ese primer año y mi mamá, aunque llegaba de la casa cansada, asustada, porque no sabía qué hacer en este país, no sabía cómo navegar, ella llegaba y se sentaba conmigo y me trataba de ayudar con mi tarea. Ella no sabía el inglés y yo tampoco, así es que estábamos en las mismas, pero me decía, trabaja muy duro, obtén esa educación, ser mejor de lo que yo pude ser. Y recuerdo que muchas veces mi mamá llegaba, lloraba, se calmaba y me ayudaba con lo que podía. Y fue muy difícil llegar a este país y escuchar palabras bonitas de mi madre y salir a la calle y escuchar palabras como get out or you don't belong here.
From 1668 to 1898, Chamorros were colonized by the Spanish and banished to practice indigenous song and dance. On December 8, 1941, Japan bombed Guam 4 hours after Pearl Harbor. December 10, 1941, Guam was invaded by Japan. From 1941 to 1944, Japan occupied Guam and forced the Chamorro people to learn Japanese and abolish the use of the Chamorro language. Yvonne, I love that you tell your story in Spanish. I personally don't know how to speak Chamorro, and that's something that both me and my parents regret not learning. Our pupils have a history of telling us that we don't belong and that we shouldn't use our language and that our presence isn't welcomed. But I want you to know that you do belong and that you deserve to be here.
Hello? This one's gonna work. Hello, hello. Mm. College life. So I graduated high school in 2011. Jeez, a long time ago. And I was the first, well, my sister graduated first, but to put in perspective how long it took her to graduate high school, she was a senior when I was a freshman. She graduated when I was a junior. She graduated high school when I was a junior. So it took her quite a while to graduate high school. And so I like to claim that I graduated first because I only graduated in 4 years. And so when I graduated, after the graduation, I could not find, we graduate outside in a big football stadium, and I could not find my family. So, but I'm celebrating with everybody else's family because like they're giving out candy and everything else, right? So I'm having a blast, I'm walking around, I'm laughing. Oh, we made it, girl, it's crazy, ooh. And I'm looking for my family, like, no, for real, like, where is my family at? And I'm asking people, like, have you seen my family? No, you know? And then I see my sister and brother, and I'm like, where y'all been? Like, it's been like 30 minutes. This is a long time. You know what I'm saying? There's a couple hundred people here, and I can't find you. And my sister's like, oh, we're up at the car. We've been up there for a long time. So I walk up to the car with my sister and them, leave all the hype at the stadium to walk up to the parking lot. I'm like, why y'all at the parking lot? Like, what is going on? It's because my mom was crying because she had worked so hard to get me to graduate as well. And to have people constantly label me all the time and to fight the institution in order for them to believe how intelligent I was and to let them know that, no, my daughter is actually smart, you just don't listen to the way that she learns. So that's why I got to develop my own IEP. Well, my mom fought for me to be able to develop my own IEP. So when there was tests that everybody else had to sit in a room and write, I got to speak my tests because that's how I learn and that's how I can show you how I learn things. And that to me, it makes me smile to know that my mom was up there crying. I'm like, you could have cried down the stadium. What's going on? And so in high school, I didn't get to be able to. I didn't get signed when everybody else was signed to go play college basketball because I tore my rotator cuff in my right arm and I'm right-handed. And so I missed the first 10 games of my senior year, and which was a really big deal because I was a Division I prospect. I had all these Division I huge schools looking at me, and they used to call me all the time. And then when I got hurt, nobody called me. Like, the phone never rang. And I remember when my high school coach called me in and he told me, oh, there's this thing called a junior college, and that's a good thing because then you get to focus on your education. And I'm devastated because I don't hear D1. So I'm like, I don't care about none of this. Like, ain't no D's in front of it. I don't care. And so I got a full ride to go to Texas. And so I'd never been to Texas ever in my life. I was born in Oklahoma and then came to Washington through all the states, but I'd never been to Texas. I got on a plane, didn't know where I was going, and just went to Texas and stayed down there for my first year. And it was hard. It was the first time I ever had other black people call me white, and I was darker than them. So it was really like, what are you talking about? And what they were trying to say was like, you talk proper, so there's no way you could have went through any type of racism or injustice or anything. And that was a learning experience that I carry near and dear to my heart now. And when I came back after my freshman year of college, my mom passed away in the middle of the night unexpectedly. And I was devastated because I'm the only kid out of my mom's 4 children that does not know my biological father. So my mom is my only parent, and she's always been my only parent. And that was why I went and played basketball, and why I played in all the tournaments, and why I changed my grades around and all these different things, and why I was really good at saving money too, because I eventually wanted to do all these things that, kids want to do for their parents, right? Like, I want to build my mom a house, I want to have a car, and all that was gone away in a blink of an eye. And I did not know what I was going to do after that, because I was like, I don't want to play basketball. How weird would that be to play basketball and to just be waiting for my mom to walk in the gym and she's not? Like, I don't want to play. What does that do for the sport? So But I had other opportunities because I knew that, okay, I could still go to school, I could still do all these things. People kept speaking like powerful things to me, like, you can still do this. And I'm like, no, I can't, leave me alone. You know, I'm devastated. And then I kept going to school, which is really strange that I've been in school this long, like since 2011, never took a break. Just now graduating, just saying, stay in the fight. So I will be the first person in my family to graduate, and it's to graduate from Evergreen, well, to graduate college, period, and having conversations with my mom's mom, my granny, who is also fighting 2 types of cancer right now. I asked her, like, who else graduated in our family? And she's like, nobody. And it was kind of funny to me because she said it like it was just like a normal thing. Like, why would anybody else graduate? I'm like, you know how many generations came before me? Nobody graduated college. She's like, no, your mom was the first person to graduate high school. My mom has 7 brothers and sisters. She's the middle child. She was the first person to graduate high school. And that was it. Like, that was just like a thing. Like, for them, they were like, yeah, we knew you would be the first person to graduate college because you take after your mom. And I was just like, all right, so that's a story of how, well, that's my story of how I kind of redefine myself because it took a while to dismantle all the labels that people put on me. And I'll be graduating soon.
We're done? What's that? Oh, it's you? No, you're next. It's good. Okay, my bad. No, I thought it was no shit.
Shamerica, I am so grateful for you. I want to start by saying you don't owe me any patience, you don't owe me any gratitude, and you certainly don't owe any of us your story. You and I both know you are the descendant of Black brilliance. I am the descendant of those who took the deal of whiteness. Accepted history chooses my comfort and my narrative over your legacy. And I want you to know I choose your history and your legacy. We've talked before about how you are your ancestors' wildest dreams and your mom's deepest pride. And I'm proud of you too. When you share your truth, it means so, so much to me. People will have us believe that we can't both be free, that my freedom necessitates the absence of yours, but I believe that our freedom is bound up in each other. You choose how to get free, and I choose whether or not to trust that. I hear you, I see you, I honor you. You give me life every single day. You are your mother's story, you are your sister's story, you are your country's story. And again, you don't owe me anything. You don't owe this place anything. We owe you, and this institution owes you, and this country owes you. You owe yourself everything. I hope you get it, and most of all, I trust you.
Mi familia y yo hemos tenido que hacer muchos sacrificios para que yo pudiera obtener una educación universitaria como estudiante de primera generación. Era natural para mí haber elegido a continuar mis estudios en the Evergreen State College porque ya sabía el campus por 5 años debido al programa Upward Bound. Poco sabía la incomodidad y ostracismo que viene con ser una persona de color en a predominantly white campus. He encontrado el racismo y el odio siendo arrojado no solo a mí, sino también a otras personas de color. Después de estos encuentros, encontraba apoyo con familiares, amigos o gente del programa TRiO Upward Bound.
My name is Gabriel Emeka. I'm the son of Morris Lee Porter Emeka and Sunday Arlene Bacon Emeka. And they were married in 1966. I'm the son of a black man and a white woman who were married in a year when interracial marriage was still unlawful in about half of the states in the United States. And to put some historical perspective into the journey of some of my ancestors and some of my family, my father's grandfather, the man who bounced my father on his knee, was born into slavery in 1860 and passed away in 1948 when my father was 7 years old. And my father is a product of the segregated South, in so much as everybody else was during that era in that place, and a product of black schools in the South. And what most people don't know, and what history has chosen not to remember, is that there were a lot of black schools in the South that had it going on. There were a lot of black schools in the South that produced top-notch scholars. There still are, for that matter. But desegregation, when desegregation happened, it did not mean just a bilateral coming together of the races. What it meant was the dismantling of the black education system and the begrudging acceptance of black students into white schools. My grandfather, my father's father, was a principal. He was demoted to being some sort of office administrator in the school district when desegregation came along. And my grandmother and my aunties, who were teachers, just simply lost their jobs because most of the black teachers were not allowed to teach in white schools. And so the problem with desegregation, the biggest problem with desegregation, is that the racism didn't go away. And unfortunately, that persists. That's still the problem with desegregation. And that's what we're working to try to solve and address for future generations.
So I graduated in 2012 at Mount Tahoma High School. So cool. And I attended Gonzaga University up in Spokane, Washington. Go Zags, number one in the nation. We lost, but we're still almost undefeated. Anyways, so I went to Gonzaga. It's a private school. It's like $50,000 a year. So how can a poor Tacoma kid, afford that? So I actually earned a prestigious scholarship called the Act 6. And it's a scholarship basically recognizing community leadership. And so that got me to college. It paid for most of my college career. But there was this little story within Act 6. So I applied for that scholarship on the last day. And Felix actually wrote my recommendation letter too, so thank you. And so there's a 3-part process to the scholarship. I won't bore you with the whole thing, but it starts off with like 3,000. Then the second process, like there's only like 50 left. And then by the last process, there's like 12. And somehow, some way, I made it to the last process. And the last process is you go to the school and you do this like interview. They do this mock essay. And then you just pray and hope that you get it. And so during that process, you get to meet all the other people who make it to the end. And it's what happens, and I hope that, I don't know, this is like typical, and I think it happens a lot, is you start to compare yourself to the people around you. And so, people were coming in and like, I started a nonprofit, when I was in high school, and like I was ASB president, or like I ran track and field, and I did this and this and that. And I started looking at myself and I was like, wow, how did I get here through this process? I was like, man, So during one of the process, there was, you had 1 hour. They gave you a prompt, and you had to write a paper of like how you view leadership. And so that hour started, and I remember like people around me were typing like crazy, and I was like just stuck. I was like, because just talking to them before about what they did kind of put me on a notice, like, wow, maybe I'm not good enough. And I saw people typing, and like we had an hour, 10, 30 minutes later, people were on like the second page. I was on the second sentence because I was just like stone cold, like frozen, because I was thinking like, I'm not gonna make it anyways, why even try? And, you know, I kind of thought back to, like, I just wanted to give up, but I kind of thought back to like why I got here in the first place and all the hard work I did. And the story I shared with you with my family, being refugee survivors, they survived that much, their blood is in me, and I could do that. And also all my friends too. If you, of that story when we were in a line with 6 other Asian boys, I was the only one who went to college. They all didn't go to college. Actually, they went to prison. Because, you know, it's a long story, but the system fails you sometimes. And so at that moment, again, I was just thinking, you know, gosh, I'm on the second, third sentence, and literally like 30, 40 minutes past, I'm still sitting there. And everybody's on their second page. Some people are done. They're like editing. And I'm like, oh, God. But I kind of thought to myself, okay, what can you do? What can you do? And I told myself, I'm probably going to get 1 paragraph in. So I'm going to make it the best goddamn paragraph I ever wrote in my life. And I wrote 1 paragraph, just 1 paragraph. And as obvious as I'm here right now, I got the scholarship. I went to Gonzaga, and I graduated in 2016 in May. So, whew, how that works. And you know, this is about recognizing that, you know, you're good enough. You can do it. Thank you. Yeah.
I want to respect people's time. And we actually have more stories to share, but we've run out of time. This event that you just were witness to was an opportunity for us to share with this Evergreen and TRiO community. In 2 weeks from now, we are going to go to Jacksonville, Florida, to share these stories and the stories that you didn't hear with 1,000 folks that work in colleges and universities whose mission and objective is to make sure that students like these have the best opportunity to be successful. And when we think about the stories that they've shared, how some of them may have resonated with you, may have made you stop and think for a second about maybe interactions you've had with students in the past, or systems or structures that are in place that don't take into account the things that they've brought to the surface. But just like that first image that I put up there, with one of the Little Rock Nine being screamed at by another student who were both going to the same school, is proof, even today, that despite being in the same institution, the experiences are much different. And these are the success stories. These are the students who have actually graduated. And what they had to go through to be successful pales in comparison to other folks. Their experience at this institution or any other institution is not equivalent in terms of wear and tear on their psyche, on their confidence, and on their well-being, as if somebody who's coming from legacy, somebody whose grandparents, great-grandparents, parents went to institutions just like these. And so often in events like this, we showcase the model students, right? Y'all all know how that goes. But they were apprehensive and scared to share their stories with people who may view it as entertainment, that may view it as professional development and check it off the box. But they're only going to share these stories is if you're literally and actually going to take them into consideration the next time you interact with somebody who comes from a background of oppression. So I do this work for them, but I also do this work for the students that didn't make it, like Lamar. I also do this work for the students that didn't make it, like Ricky or Ben. Because for every one of them that are successful, there's twice as many more that aren't, because of the systems and the mindsets that are in place. But the only way that this can change is if these stories are taken seriously. Because the institutions of higher ed are filling up with first generation, low income, and students of color. So their voices and experiences are going to be the catalyst to change and transform of how we go about business. Because we are doing this for the Upward Bound students. They're helping prepare the institution for you, for the high school students that are sitting in here. And which means that you have to keep your end of the bargain up at looking at the struggle that they went through to help you navigate the complicated, nuanced, passive-aggressive ways to stifle and silence people in the educational system. Got a question? Okay. So, I want to open this up for people to provide feedback and comments. But before I do that, I'm going to pass this microphone down this row, and they're going to acknowledge somebody that they know, who they went to school with, who's no longer here. And they're also going to list out what they would like to see happen, so that this stage isn't just filled with them as college graduates, but this room that's here on March the 3rd, 2017, can produce a graduating class that looks just like this from college in 2021, in 2022, in 2023.
Eagle and Jay, and my demand is that there should be more diversity in the books and languages that we have in our library, and also more groups for people of color to be able to speak freely.
I do this for Deja, and my demands is to have faculty that will affirm all its students.
I do this for Dennis, Ricky, Lawrence, and I just want to say that I know there's many faculty who work very hard every day, and you defend us, and you say you defend us, but I also demand that as you say that you defend us, you also don't defend the system that is hurting us as well.
This is for Hector Montes.
My demand is to expand financial aid to help low-income students and to also track race-related offenses on campuses.
Mine is for Chris and Karen and Christian, and my demand is that our stories be incorporated into our schools. It's not enough for me and for my peers to learn about our culture in college because we decide to take a class on that certain subject. Our culture should be taught in school and should be acknowledged and accepted.
And I'm doing this for all of you beautiful people. And my demand is that if the student population looks like this at any school, then the faculty and administration population should look like this at that school. If the city looks like this, then City Hall should look like this. Because diversity is not enough. Diversity without equity is exploitation. Let me say that again. Diversity without equity is exploitation. Thank you.
Got anything for us? No? Again, we've worked with each other the last handful of weeks to prepare for this event. And I cannot stress the amount of stress that they have conveyed to us about their experiences through these institutions. So the stories that you heard today cannot be forgotten. And the legacy of keeping this work up sits in this room of the next generation of folks to come through and go off to college.
I do this, well, I strive to survive because I realize I'm wrapped in black skin. And understanding that the foundation of racism is anti-blackness, I have to pave the way for other black youth. And that is one of my motivations. And understanding that I have a black nephew and a black niece, and in a society that views them as dangerous and views you as dangerous, that's why I do it.
Okay. I appreciate everyone's attendance. This will be the first of a series of events to commemorate the 40 years of TRiO at the Evergreen State College. We hope that people will participate in the events coming up over the spring and through the summer and into the fall. And we hope and pray that despite the progress that we've made over the last 6 decades, that the Upward Bound program can be expanded to support some of the most underserved students in Lakewood, Tacoma, and Shelton, because we know through quantitative data and the stories that you shared with us, the need is more than ever. So thank you. Have a good weekend. Stay dry. And don't forget where you came from.